Welcome to Picks with the Professor, the show where a real statistics professor gives you sports betting tips. This is college basketball for Tuesday, January 16th. Solid Tuesday slate. We're in that part of the year where the Tuesday slates are usually only, 20, 30 games, but usually they're all bigger conferences, more interesting, a lot of good games. We got three of them that we like here for you on the free pick show, three more in the extended cut, including the play of the day, six best bets for the day as of now. Jake, looking at the overall slate today, as of right now, we have zero A grade plays on any side. The only A grade plays we have are totals, and we don't even have that many of them. And I remember this last year that Tuesdays tended to have that because of the fact that the Tuesdays are the bigger schools and there's just a little bit more research done, and it's just a little bit more. The market's a little bit smarter with games. We were just talking about this right before we came on the airs. We were chit chatting, and sometimes the value of the model is not to tell you what to play, but tell you where you just don't have any value. And if you're playing it for fun, that's fine, but it's not going to be something you should count on to sustain your bankroll. I don't know if you have any other thoughts you want to expound on with that.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think at this point of the year, all the concentration for the most part is going on the college basketball. There's not all of it, but there's not as much going on. Like the NFL playoffs are down to.
But I do have to interject and say they maybe should spend more time on the NFL playoffs because we continue to destroy on the NFL. And apparently they aren't spending enough time figuring it out because we continue to easily make money. So that's a whole other issue, but continue.
Yeah. So like these games where you've got like the loaded slate that, I mean, there's games on there that I'm super interested in, like TCU, Cincinnati, St. John's, and Seton Hall, like that aren't making the cut here. And it's a loaded slate, and they're going to be paying attention because they know all eyes, all action is going to be there. Especially after I think almost all the NBA teams played today on Monday. So for MLK and
a bunch of hockey played too.
Yeah, so I think there's going to be less of those. It's good. Sometimes it's better to not play as many and not force yourself into stuff, like, because it's the same concept of like chasing your losses and stuff. So every once in a while, if you start forcing it, feel like you're forcing it, maybe take a few plays back. It's no big deal.
And again, one of the benefits, in my opinion, Dub Club, seeing the model, see what it says, and that doesn't mean the model's right. It's not. All models are wrong, right? It's just kind of trying to give you a little bit of here's the direction we're seeing this. Here's how, one tool in your toolkit to kind of tell you maybe not what side to play, maybe what side not to play. Kind of it's this or pass, or kind of just saying, it thinks there's not a lot of value. The one I had my eye on specifically, Utah State and New Mexico, according to Sideline, might be the best game of the day. Now, part of that is because when it's compared to one of the games we will talk about here, Iowa State and BYU, which I think will personally be the best game of the day, a few more points. The total is 15 points higher. And part of the rating for how good the game is points, because we all like to see points, right? And so I've coded that in. But that one, and again, not to give everything away that we have on Dub Club, but again, you got a free 1-week trial if you sign up today. The link's in the show description, so you can come see this. Right now, we've got a C grade pick on the total and a D grade pick on the side, basically just kind of saying like, hey, the market we think's pretty spot on this one. And it's the one I was most excited about because it's the late game and an interesting game, and we love the Mountain West, right? And it's like I wanted to have something on that, but I'm looking at them and going like, well, if I do, it's just going to be a tiny bit of money just for fun, but it ain't going to be anything that I'm really counting on to grow our bankroll, because there's not a lot of value. There's a lot of games like that on this Tuesday slate. There's a handful of sides that Jake, you and I have our eye on, and we're going to talk about those in the extended cut. So again, one of the benefits of being in Dub Club, we sometimes have these discussions on Discord. We'll sometimes talk about it here in the extended cut, and you get that extended cut again if you're within Dub Club. Sign up, link in the show description. The QR code will take you right there for that free 1-week trial. So we'll have a fun discussion there. Otherwise, though, we'll get started at 5 p.m. Eastern. Jake, I don't know if this is earlier because of weather. There's weather all over the country.
They got about 8-ish inches in Knoxville, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're in a place that they shut down schools for wind and a half an inch of snow, 8 inches is world ending.
And so it gets earlier, I guess, to help with road congestion. I don't know. I don't think it was scheduled for this time initially because its rotation number. Its rotation number's later on. It implied that it was supposed to be a 7 p.m. start, and now it's 2 hours earlier.
Yeah, it got moved up. I don't know.
Yeah, here we are. Someone in the comments can tell us why. It doesn't really matter why, but it's earlier. At 5 p.m. Eastern, standalone at least for the first half. And realistically, for most of the game, it'll be kind of the only thing on. Tennessee is pretty good. Sideline has them ranked number 5 overall. Florida, probably decent enough to make the tournament if you had to assign the seeds now. Decent offense. Defense is a little bit worse. Plays really fast, though. You can see that according to Sideline, the 10th fastest team or 10th, highest with regards to expected number of possessions. And of course, we know possessions lead to points. Jake, Tennessee's defense is really good, but we've kind of talked about it all season. We've backed Tennessee in these overs a handful of times, and I think people were skeptical, especially early on, but we kind of kept saying, like, hey, this offense isn't bad. It's not quite that same, call it four corners offense or whatever you want to disparagingly call it, that it seemed like they used to run. Like, Tennessee's not really running up and down the court fast, but even their pace isn't that bad. And part of that might be teams speeding them up too. I'm not really sure the specifics on that, but we're getting a lot of points in Tennessee's games. It's coming very strongly in through the results. 10 overs and only 5 unders. Their last 3 games have gone over. All 3 of those have been conference games. We're going to go over 159. B grade value, not one of the highest value picks on the board, but one of the best bets that we have of our top 6 most favorite plays. Jake, you're a Tennessee expert. You've seen a lot of games. Tennessee's would have gone over this number against Georgia in their last game. They would have gone over this number in their first conference game against Ole Miss. Yeah, how do you feel about this over?
But I like this over. Florida plays extremely fast, and that's what they're going to do. They're going to try to make everybody play their pace. I don't think Tennessee is necessarily going to want to. I mean, they'll try to slow them down a little bit. The defense is still very, very good. It's just so you can't help but try to slow Florida down a little bit, take them out of their game. But I don't think it'll be enough because, especially coming back home after back-to-back road games, and being able to put 70 plus on Mississippi State is an accomplishment this year. Putting up 85 at Georgia was very impressive offensive showing there at times, and at times it was I don't know what happened, and that seems to be Tennessee's problem in general. But I think the pace plus how Tennessee's offense goes, I think especially when Vescovi's off the floor and you've got Ziegler really running the point, Connect, Josiah Jordan-James, Gainey or random other guard with Adu out there, they can really run the floor, and Ziegler seems to really have figured out how he wants to play. He's shooting the ball incredibly well, distributing the ball all around, and I don't know that Tennessee has a great matchup for Walton. Florida, Walter Clayton, sorry, not Walton. He is I did not see this coming. I thought he was like the second 2.5 best on Iowa's team last year, and man, he has just shown that he might have been the best player on the team, and it's just an incredible year he's having right now. They've got a fairly deep squad, but their defense doesn't do enough to help them out. And I think that's really going to help the points here because Tennessee's offense can go cold, and if the defense isn't forcing a ton of turnovers, that's going to let Tennessee's offense do more than what it normally would.
And you kind of talked about there's been a handful of teams that have matched up better with Tennessee and been a little bit more successful scoring against them. And there's been some teams that haven't, of course. But I mean, Mississippi State, of course, got the win against them, put up 77. Georgia put up 79. Of course, both those were on the road. So those teams at home, you expect to have a easier time than Florida coming in on the road. But even, at home, they allowed 79 to Illinois. And so it's like there's been some teams who put up some points, and part of what has happened with the points has been the pace. This Tennessee team is just playing faster. And again, I don't know how fast it is. They're just playing reasonably paced basketball, whereas they didn't really want to do that before. And that's exactly what we expect here with Florida, really trying to put the pedal to the metal. We like this over here. This is one where, you can wait for it to go down. 158 would actually be an A grade. I mean, that point could obviously matter. And we talk all the time about the benefit of the models helping us know what to play because, there's going to be random things happen. This is a really random sport. And so kind of the value in what we're talking about here is to tell us that 159 is just too low. If the total was 162, we wouldn't have talked about this game. We would have just said, we don't think there's any value in it. And that doesn't mean the game wouldn't get to 170. It just means that, there's just not a lot of value in the number. And so you can choose to hope to get 158, wait for that A grade, that extra point, which might matter. But in general, we kind of think that the B grades are, there's some of them worth playing. This is one of them that we like, that we think, even though the value isn't as big, it's still worth a play, especially considering it's very possible that both the sideline and the books have struggled to catch up with this Tennessee offense, this Tennessee pace, and be like, they're actually kind of a reasonable college basketball team, which they weren't before. They were like trying to be Virginia, it seems like, which I'm sure you love as a Tennessee fan, watching a team that was like trying to be like a baby version of Virginia, right?
Yeah, no, that was frustrating. And so, like, I bring it back to this team's offensively works with Rick Barnes is how he wants to do things. Back to like I don't know if they're this good, but the 2019 team with Grant Williams and all that, he's got a guy in Dalton Connect that he can give the ball to at the beginning or at the end of the clock and say, "Get me a bucket," and he does for the most part. And that team had this very similar build, except it was more through the post instead of a bigger guard like Dalton Connect, but they have a guy now, so that works. That's exactly what Rick Barnes did with Kevin Durant when he was there. He said, "Hey, you're the offense."
Yeah,
which works out. Like, don't be wrong, it worked out. But so I think that is it's the same offense, just has a lot more talent.
Yeah, and if you're a Longhorn fan, and we talk about my dad being a Longhorn fan, so I watched a lot of the Kevin Durant era, or the games. It was 1 year, of course, and heard a lot of complaints about, they could have done so much more if they had tried to actually run an offense rather than just be like, you get to play hero ball. And obviously Durant was fantastic, but he was really small then too, and needed a little bit more help because he didn't have the muscle that he put on later in his career, of course, and could have used a little bit of better schematic offense. But yes, he did that same sort of just, you can do your thing. I think Barnes has gotten a little bit better as a coach since then, and just adding a little bit of offense to that guy makes them have, according to Sideline, the 14th best offense. So we like the over here, over 159. B grade pick model thinks mid to low 160s is the average outcome. 7 p.m. Eastern, Missouri and Alabama. And Jake, we talked about Alabama, number 1 offense in the country. Very fast, not quite as fast as Florida, but number 28 according to Sideline and Pace. Missouri, we've kind of talked about, it's been a little bit of an under team this year relative to expectations. Not that they've been the strongest under team, but they've slowed it down a lot more than usual. Their offense is better than their defense, but not quite by as much. In my head, I just think of these Missouri teams as kind of like the Marquettes, where playing fast and forcing turnovers, and that's just not what this team is doing. A little bit different iteration. The issue is when you play Alabama, you kind of get sucked into their game. We're going to go back to the over 158.5 with Alabama. A grade pick on this one, as the model thinks mid 160s. So another over. We think we can get to the 160s. Jake, tell us more.
Yeah, like Bama at home just puts up ridiculous number after ridiculous number. I know South Carolina didn't do their part, but that was a 30-point win. They didn't need to push it. But after that, like,
that was a bonkers game, by the way. Total of 153, and it got to 121. And just for the record, Jake, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you, and we had I think we had the over and the side in that one, so we split. If you're thinking about that game and being like, hey, they didn't get over in that game and it wasn't even remotely close. Remember, outliers happen in college basketball. Alabama 11-5 to the over. So we've played, I think, like every Alabama over this season. I think it's been just about every single one of them. We've got 11-5. That's pretty incredible. We'll take the loss to South Carolina. That happens because we got a bunch of other wins to go with it. So anyway, sorry to interrupt. Carry on, Jake.
Yeah, and I mean, Alabama's that's the only time they've scored below 80 at home. And I mean, like, that's impressive. Just the fact that they're just constantly putting up 80 plus. I mean, maybe just quick math here, maybe even like 85. It might be the only time they've been under 85. Mm-hmm. And their defense is solid, but at the pace they play, there's just so many more opportunities for an offense, so that they're going to give up more points. They have Alabama's offense is incredible, shoots a ton of threes. Everybody knows that. But Missouri, they've got a fairly decent offense. They do a good job of taking care of the ball. They play a little bit faster. They shoot a little bit faster. They do good from the free throw line. They're really good inside the arc. The three ball's not been there this year, and that's been kind of a big letdown for them. But they also give up a lot of offensive rebounds, and that's going to happen when you shoot as many threes as they do and as many threes as Alabama does. I think there's going to be a lot of quick transition buckets for both teams after a long rebound or something like that. I think we get a ton of extra points that way.
They've gone over in the last 2 games, which matters because that's conference play. The last one was overtime, so maybe you kind of throw that one out a little bit. But against Kentucky at Kentucky, they went over a very similar number, 160. And honestly, I don't see Kentucky and Alabama being that different with expected number of points. They're both better on offense than defense. They both play fast. You saw what Kentucky did with A&M. We talked about that one for Saturday show, that right, the A&M hadn't scored like 60 points since 1912 or whatever. And obviously I'm being silly, but A&M hadn't been scoring points. They played Kentucky, and it's like, sure, we'll put up 90 in regular, 89 in regulation, right? And that's what Kentucky does to teams. That's what Alabama does to teams. And so Missouri's been kind of 50-50, to the over this year. And again, in my brain, I've been a little bit disappointed with the number of points because I like points. It's not that it's been bad. I just like to see points. And, so you have to be a little bit disappointed from that aspect of it relative to, I think, the expectations of what we've got, what I think I've grown accustomed to, at least with that team. But, when they play at Kentucky, it's back to normal, fun basketball. That's what we expect to happen here. Jake, as a reminder to people, if you sign up on Dub Club, you get a free trial in that link description. You can get the cheat sheet with all of this great information, including all of this in easier to digest table form, where each line is only 2 games, color coded with a total recommendation and a side recommendation. Check it out. See if you like it. Support the show if you're enjoying watching all the content that we make here and put out for free, and then you get more content. So we appreciate all your business over there. And this is what you can kind of see. Jake, we want to spend an extra couple minutes to talk about the side on this one, because this is another game where, and I believe we talked about Alabama and whoever that was. I just went away from that screen last week. And was it Mississippi State maybe, where we I don't think it was in.
No, Texas A&M, Kentucky.
Yeah, I think it was Mississippi State, and we talked about, or maybe it was something else. I don't even remember anymore. It's I'm sleep deprived with the baby, and we talked about side and total. This one we looked into the side. Alabama's a big favorite in this one. The number that I had pulled earlier in the day was 15. And you can see on the screen there, the model projects them to win by an average of 18. You can see it in the second line model. Thinks to be 18-point. Underdogs are favorites, depending on which team you're looking at. While we think the game can get to the mid-60s, and that's our favorite play of the day on this one, and I hate to lay bigger numbers because it gets a little bit wonky towards the end of the game, especially with a number like this. You don't know if it's going to land 12 or 18 or 22 with how it all plays out. But model thinks there might be a little bit of value laying it with Alabama. You kind of like laying it with Alabama too. So I'll give you an opportunity to tell us why, if someone is so inclined, minus 15 might be worth a look, and or what number you're really more excited to play Alabama at if it were to come down.
I mean, I love Alabama at home. They clean up for the most part. Defense plays better. I guess they're more comfortable in the offense. We already talked about how well the offense plays at home. I really don't like Missouri this year. I don't think their basketball is leading to good basketball. I think Judge Gates is struggling a little bit here to figure this team out and to get them going in the right direction. So I don't trust them to be able to hang with this Alabama team. I mean, if you look at their last, 7 games, their only win being Central Arkansas. The rest of the time they got beat by Kansas. I mean, that was a close game. Gave up 93 to Seton Hall, who tries to not score as much as possible. Got waxed by Illinois. Georgia got them at home and went to Kentucky, lose that one pretty good, and go to overtime with South Carolina, a game they should have had wrapped up, and they let them come back in and lost that game. I don't think Missouri has got the team this year to hang with Bama, especially on the road. And I think that's where I would play the 15. Would love 13, but like I'm already laying the 15. So
and again, model thinks about 18. I'm like 13 would be my number personally, and I realized what is Missouri playing Kentucky last week as well that we highlighted, that we had double A grades. We laid it, and then we had the over as well, I think, for our official picks. I don't remember which one we covered specifically on the show, but we talked about both of them a little bit. And that one, Kentucky won by 13, so that's why kind of 13 matters. They were favored by 11 and a half. Bama's a little bit better than Kentucky, so it makes sense that the line would be a little bit higher. But kind of, as you mentioned, that would be the summary point that I would make there is that, you saw this Missouri team go on the road to Kentucky and struggle, and you kind of expect the same thing here. The number might be important there. Alabama might win this game by 20, and it may not matter at all. But just, again, the normal caveats apply. We're talking about a typical game. You never know what's going to happen in sports. And obviously we're kind of talking about back in the home team, but even today we saw a couple of home teams get outshot from three by 20, 30%. College sports are weird. That's why we recommend smart bankroll management, never more than 5% of your bankroll on one play, typically never more than 3 or 4%, because there's a lot of variance in this, and our confidence never comes in one game. So if this one pick misses, we say we understand there's going to be weird games all the time. The confidence comes in multiple plays, and that's 50, 100, 150. And if that takes you a month to get to, that's fine. It is what it is, right? And Cousin Jared mentioned this. In college basketball, you can do that in a Saturday if you really felt like it. But personally, I know most of us don't, thankfully, or else we'd probably lose our minds. But, anything can happen in one game. We're projecting the average contest, and we think that this is a pretty good number for the over. And we are kind of leaning on the 15. Jake, you like it a little bit more than I do, but the model likes as well, thinks it should be 18. The Alabama can, on average, run away with this one. So some thoughts for you on that one. And then wrapping us up late night, Iowa State and BYU, two teams the model absolutely loves and thinks that the polls are disrespecting. I get why they're a little bit lower in the polls. The polls are a little bit more about resume. And these teams have come up on the wrong side of a few games here and there. Here's the thing, though. One of the things the model, is kind of trained to do is figure out, were those losses where you just got outplayed and you're just not that good? Or was it kind of fluky? Was it you just went cold because that's going to happen? And BYU's home loss the other day was one of those where they just shot way worse. And that was at home. And that's weird. I get it. Weird. College sports are weird. College basketball is weird, right? Did the other team just catch fire? And it's like nothing you can do about that, right? And that's kind of what the model thinks about these teams. It really likes them. Iowa State specifically the defense. BYU both the offense and defense. And yet we're talking about these defenses, which are incredible. And yeah, we're still going to go over. We do have unders on the extended cut. We got 2 of them for you there. So check that out if you like some unders. And again, we'll have more sides going forward. This is just a weird night, right? So if this is your first show with us, we do cover sides as well. But we got a trio of overs today. The A-grade overs have been good to us this season. And Jake, to me, the defenses are great, but there should be a decent little bit of pace to this one. Not breakneck speed, but there will be a decent number of possessions. These offenses are good. BYU's offense is really good. And this is all about the number. If the total is priced at 145, I'm not touching this. The average number of points in college basketball this year has been right about 145. And I think that's a pretty reasonable total. Model says 147.2 on average, but this being priced at 141.5, I think kind of ignores two things. Number one, the fact that the pace should be a little bit above average. And number two, that while Iowa State's defense is incredible, the top offenses are better than the top defenses. And you have a top offense in BYU that's going to push the scoring up, especially at home. Jake, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'm very confused on why it's at 141. I don't know, especially with it being at BYU, the better offense being at home. I don't understand it. I'm happy it's there because I'm going to hit this one pretty good. There's one, maybe 2 games that they've been under this number all year, and those I'm not exactly sure what to make of UCF, but San Diego State's a very solid defensive team that plays.
Well, UCF, I believe, was one of the. I don't know if you were Cousin Jared on here or was in the extended. I don't know when I mentioned it, but UCF was one of the few teams that I talked about having an offense not inside the top 100, but a defense inside the top 25. And I mentioned it going forward to this week matchup with them in BYU, saying that'll be an interesting matchup because UCF's got a pretty good defense, but their offense really lags behind. And that's kind of what you saw in that game, right? Was just, UCF at home dragging it down a little bit, which isn't the style of game BYU typically plays at home.
Yeah, no, this game will have a little bit more pace to it. And what Iowa State wants to do on defense kind of leads to what BYU wants to do on offense. They want to force you to take long jump shots, contested, not contested. They just don't want you near the bucket. And BYU has no desire to get close to the bucket. They're not very aggressive on offense. They're not getting to the line a lot. They shoot. They're in the top 3 with percentage of 3-pointers attempted, with about a little more than half their shots coming from beyond the arc. And I mean, they're hitting at 37%. So I would do that too if I was shooting that as well as they are. And I just think their offense is going to be good enough to put a lot of points on Iowa State. Iowa State's got a very good offense that really can attack the bucket. They're also a pretty good 3-point shooting team. They just don't shoot a ton of them, but they work the ball around pretty well. Both teams are good for the free throw line. They don't do a ton. They don't turn the ball over a ton. Iowa State's used to forcing a ton of turnovers, so I'm interested to see how that works. But I think the pace here gets us. I mean, mid-140s feels right. I'm very confused at 141.
Yeah, I'm like you. Should kind of play out average. Iowa State's defense is very good, and that kind of should offset with, again, the top offenses being a little bit better than the top defenses. The pace, kind of just all that kind of balance. It should be about average. So why this is so low? I'll come up with a couple theories, a couple things that you viewer might be saying. Well, what about this, right? Well, Iowa State's typically viewed as an under team. They've actually gone over 9 out of 16 times, and you might say yes, but their last 3 games they've gone under. Okay, but I will counter that with that was Oklahoma, Houston, and Oklahoma State. That is not BYU. It's not BYU. It's not Baylor. It's not Kansas. Like the Big 12 is a loaded basketball conference, but it's with some very drastically different style teams. And Oklahoma State, Houston specifically, and Oklahoma a little bit too, got to play a little bit of especially Oklahoma State, Houston, really going to play a different ball game. And Iowa State, is very comfortable playing in that style of game because their defense is so legit. But when you look at what Iowa State's done against teams who want to push the tempo a little bit more, Iowa got over some of the random non-conference teams, weaker teams that push the pace got over. I mean, they're consistently putting up in the 90s and or the 80s in some of these non-conference games. You say those are weaker defenses. It's like, yeah, sure. But go back and look at other teams that play at this pace even aren't able to put up 90s, and whatnot against these type teams, against Eastern Illinois, right? A lot of teams are putting up 80 against Eastern Illinois. They play slow, got a good defense, right? It's an under team right there. And Iowa State put up 80 on them. So from Iowa State standpoint, I think they're a little bit more over than people might realize. For BYU, you might say, yeah, well, they're 5 of 16 over. The rest have been under. All 3 conference games have been under. The Baylor game barely went under. The Cincinnati game was the one that they just shot crazy. The UCF game mentioned, again, that's a defensive style team. I think a lot of the BYU games are going under because the numbers were just a scotch too high, and they were putting these totals in the mid 150s. And that's just a far cry from this total at 141.5. And so I think the market's correct a little bit on BYU. I think against a team like Iowa State, who can play a little bit more high scoring if you want to, or play a little bit more low scoring if you want to, I think this gets on the higher end of that. Again, you never know what's going to happen, right? If one of these teams goes 2 for 30 from 3, kind of like BYU did against that Cincinnati game, this over doesn't have a chance. But if somebody gets hot from 3, the under doesn't have a chance either, right? And again, we always talk about those aren't the games that we're really concerned about. If somebody gets hot and this game gets to 160, we aren't geniuses. And if somebody gets cold and it goes 120, we aren't idiots, because those type of things happen. And then it doesn't really matter your analysis because someone got hot. You can't foresee that happening. Where this matters is if this game lands in the ballpark. Is 141.5 a good number? Is 140 a good number? Is 143 a good number? That's what we're talking about. We think 141.5 is a pretty good number. And that's one to take advantage of. It's going to win more times than not. And that's going to be the long-term profitability for this pick.
Yeah, I think Texas A&M is a good game to look at for Iowa State. It got over this number just barely, but I think at that point Texas A&M didn't have the offense that they needed to, partially injured, and had a better style matchup of defense for Iowa State. So I think that's going to be the kind of game with a bit more pace. So I think it should get to the mid 140s, maybe even to 150, with what the pace will do to this.
And I would say even that at BYU, even though A&M's offense then was still inferior, I would say to BYU's offense now. So it's like BYU's better offense, should put up fewer points too.
Yeah.
And of course that was a neutral court. The home edge, again, usually BYU plays really well there. I know their last time in Provo they did not, but that's a little bit of an anomaly. Should be a rocking crowd there. We think there should be more points than what the books think. So we're going to go over a grade there. Here is your recap. Again, you can join us on Dub Club for the extended cut. We'll talk about those 3 games, which are other 3 best bets. One of those is the play of the day. We will also chit-chat about 3 or 4 sides that we kind of have our eye on. So a lot of reasons to be over there on Dub Club free trial. Come check it out. And again, we do appreciate your support if you continue to stay with us as we spend a lot of time on this content, and we hope you enjoy it. We hope you check out Dub Club. Otherwise, though, Jake, any parting words before we go to our outro slides?
I mean, jump in now for the NFL because we're just absolutely cashing everything, and there's only a few more games right now. The sideline has got the NFL nailed.
Yeah, we went 5-2, I believe, on our picks, and the 2 losses, one of them was the Bills under, which was locked in as an under pick when the weather was supposed to be crazy. And then they moved it. And so, I mean, what are you going to do, right? The other one was a plus 200 dog that we were like, I might take a chance. Didn't happen. Oh, well, it was very little risk. The other 5 picks we nailed, including Tampa Bay plus odds, money in Texans plus odds on the money line. Took the Packers plus 7.5. Jake, you like the money line, and I mean, bravo to you for being bold enough to go on record and say that. I mean, you look like a genius with that call.
Yeah, that was I don't know. Let's go genius. We'll just stick with that because that makes me feel good right now.
There you go. All right, again, 60 seconds of music, a little bit of descriptive of what's going on here. If you haven't seen it yet, if you're with us on Dub Club, you'll have the extended cut link. We will see you after the music.